We shall discuss a little political science tonight, the oldest of all the social sciences. Tonight's topic will be the origins of political parties, from the ancient Greeks and Romans to the English and Americans. In the 5th century BC, the Greek democracy arose. The word democracy comes from the Greek word demokratia, which means rule by the people. Interestingly, the Greeks had no political parties nor elections. People serving the government were chosen by lot, a lottery. They believed that a lottery was more fair than any election could ever be, because elections were subject to fraud, abuse, corruption, and bribery. It was the Romans who had what might be called political parties, though they were more nameless factions than organized parties. The Roman Senate was made up of principally two groups: the patricians, noble families, and the plebeians, merchants and the middle class. For the most part, these groups mingled and came together, but at times would split into factions on specific issues that concerned their groups. Still, they were far from what political parties are today. Also in the 5th century, the Romans developed their republic form of government, which is run by officials elected by the people. Notably, under a republic, the majority rule is limited by a written constitution which safeguards the rights of the individual and of minorities, whereas under a pure democracy, the majority rule is absolute, with no regard for the rights of the individual nor minorities. Now, having looked at the ancient Greeks and Romans, who had only mere semblances of political parties, it wasn't until the 17th century in England that we see the first real political parties forming. Two opposing groups or factions organized and took on distinct names, two fundamental characteristics of any political party, to be sure: organization and naming oneself. In 1678, a dispute arose between King Charles II and his brother James, the Duke of York. Evidently, King Charles II was a Protestant, and James was a Roman Catholic heir to the throne. Consequently, King Charles II tried to take away James's right to inherit the throne because he was a Catholic. In response, the Parliament challenged the king's right to do so, and in return, King Charles II dissolved the Parliament. In dissolving the Parliament, two opposing groups of people organized themselves into factions, parties. Those who backed the king's actions were called the abhorrers, because they abhorred any attempts to control the king's authority. The other organized faction were called the petitioners, and they urged the king to call a new parliament. Eventually, the abhorrers, king's supporters, went by the name of the Tories. Ironically, the name Tory was originally a name given to Irish Roman Catholics who had been persecuted under Protestant rule. The petitioners took the name of the Whigs. Whig was an old term for Scottish Presbyterians who opposed the government. These old names, Tory and Whig, took on new meanings. The basic difference was who should hold the power. Tories wanted a strong king, whereas the Whigs wanted the common people to have more rights and control over the government. Hence, the Tories and Whigs formed what could be called the first political parties. Now, continuing with the emergence of political parties in Western civilization, we shall focus our attention on the United States of America, where in 1787, Alexander Hamilton and others started the Federalist Party, the first political party in the United States of America, the Federalist Party, wanted a strong central federal government. Then, in 1796, Thomas Jefferson led the Anti-Federalists, eventually calling themselves the Democratic Republicans, the second political party to arise in the USA. In opposition of the Federalists, the Democratic Republican Party wanted a small, central, federal government with little power, thus leaving more power to the state and local governments. Note, the Federalists were businessmen, bankers, and merchants who believed in a strong national federal government, whereas the Democratic Republicans were made up of planters, small farmers, and craftsmen, desiring a weak national government. This debate continues to this day, but with many political party names. Political parties in the United States. Some seem to think these parties are written in stone, but do not be fooled. They aren't. The United States Constitution makes no mention of, no provision for the organization of political parties. In other words, the political party has no authorized part in the government of the United States. In England and many other countries, the government must contain 2 or more parties in order to function, and the party leader is usually either the Prime Minister or the leader of the opposition. But in the United States, the party leader need not hold office and is often content with being the man behind the scenes, who cannot be held directly responsible for the actions of those he has placed in power. In early American history, the spontaneous and unanticipated rise of the party was not looked upon with favor. But with the growth of the country in population and area, something of the kind was inevitable and necessary. Parties have arisen through differences of opinion on certain important and permanent questions of policy, such as a high protective tariff, a strong central government, etc. And that is your political science lesson for today.